Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Rob Wells Music Talk. I'm so happy that you're here because today is going to be really, really cool. I'm super excited. Here's the reason. My guest today is a world-class guitar hero, a Grammy-nominated songwriter, an international recording artist, and a soundtrack composer for film and television. He is the one and only musical legend Gary Lukas. Believe it or not, we have Gary Lukas here. Gary, the former Captain Beefheart guitarist, has recorded over 50 acclaimed albums to date in his own right in a variety of genres: jazz, rock, classical, folk, blues, avant-garde, and world music, and has performed in over 40 countries. Gary has received several Lifetime Achievement Awards for his songwriting with Jeff Buckley. He co-wrote Jeff's anthems Grace and Mojo Pin, holy smokes, and his honors including performing solo before the General Assembly of the UN to commemorate International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Whew, wow. He has performed and collaborated with a who's who of musical luminaries, including Captain Beefheart, Jeff Buckley, Leonard Bernstein, Lou Reed, Patti Smith, Chris Cornell, Bryan Ferry, Nona Hendryx, Fred Schneider, Los Van Van, Bob Weir, Nick Cave, Thurston Moore, Lukas Ligeti, Martha Wainwright, Camille O'Sullivan, Steve Kilbey, and many others. Gary has given masterclasses in guitar and songwriting at his alma mater, Yale University, Columbia University, Rutgers University, and many other academic institutions. Dubbed the thinking man's guitar hero by The New Yorker, the world's most popular avant-garde guitarist by The Independent in the UK, one of the 100 greatest living guitarists by Classic Rock. The British world music magazine Roots recently described Gary Lukas as, without question, the most innovative and challenging guitarist playing today. Rolling Stone wrote, Gary Lukas is one of the best and most original guitarists in America, a modern guitar miracle. Get this, on September 15th, 2021, Rolling Stone magazine published their list of the 500 greatest songs of all time, which included Gary Lukas and Jeff Buckley's anthem, Grace, the title track of Jeff Buckley's 2 million selling 1994 album. What? I don't even know what to say about that. That's crazy. One of the best quotes from one of my favorite artists of all time, Bruce Springsteen, is coming right up. He said this about Gary. He said, "You are a phenomenal guitarist." That's unbelievable. Captain Beefheart said the man can play guitar. Lou Reed said, "I could listen to you play for hours." Gary, beyond cool. Nick Cave said Gary's an incredible guitarist. It goes on and on and on, and I can go on and on and on, but I would like to introduce everybody to the one and only Gary Lukas. Gary, thank you so much for being here, man. I can't believe.
Hey, my honor. And I mean, I don't know if you can see it, but I'm blushing. I'm flushing. I'm blushing.
Zoom is doing a good job at keeping the red color down.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's good. It's good. How are you, Gary? Where are you?
Well, I'm here in my apartment in the West Village of Manhattan, where I've lived, oh my gosh, I moved here in 77. Yeah, that's when I took this place. And I live here now with my wife, I should say my second wife. And we're together since 82. So an awfully long time. And we have this cute little Havanese dog named Rosita, who's our pride and joy. She's wandering around in the background somewhere here.
That's great.
Yeah.
Don't worry if she makes.
No, she may bark and say hello too at some point. Oh no, I don't think so. But yeah, she loves to kind of step on my conversation sometimes, or she doesn't like it when I play the guitar in the house, which I kind of have to do. I mean, it's sort of, this apartment doubles as a rehearsal space and a workshop, and she gets very annoyed. She comes out and glares at me like, how come you're not paying attention to me?
I have a dog who refuses to let me show affection to any other member of my family now.
Right.
If I go to give a hug to my kids or my wife, he just freaks out and wants to jump on me and say, no, you're not allowed to do that. It's funny, the little personalities that they have. So 1977, you've been in the same place. How about before that? Can you tell me where did everything begin? Where are you originally from?
I'm originally from Syracuse, New York. Note the Syracuse accent, Syracuse. That's in upstate New York, central New York. It's a medium-sized, in a city, about, back in the day, 5.5 hours, let's say, drive from Manhattan. And yeah, I grew up there and spent my formative years there. That's where I actually first encountered the guitar, thanks to my dad, my late father, Murray, who's no longer here, but his legacy lingers on. You know, one day he came to me out of the blue, I think I was about 7 or 8, and said, how'd you like to play a musical instrument? How about the guitar? And it's, gee, Dad, okay, it sounded reasonable. Because I love listening to top 40 radio even before I could write my name. I'd sit in the basement in a rocking chair and just listen for hours and hours. So I was a big music fan, and we had a lot of music going in the house. Everything, all the genres you named except probably avant-garde.
Were your parents musical? Were they playing instruments as well, or did you grow up with brothers, sisters that were playing
Yeah,
instruments?
well, yes, I have 2 older sisters and a younger brother, although he passed away sadly.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, that was very, very sad. But my sisters were given piano lessons. They didn't really follow up on that. Somehow it wasn't bestowed on me, but the guitar was sort of nudged to me. And my younger brother could play drums and saxophone, but none of them, like took it to any sort of, level where it became primary to them. Whereas it seems like outside of a blip of a year or so, I just was always playing the guitar. And the year where I sort of gave it up was the first guitar my father provided was a cheap rental guitar, and the strings they had to be at least half an inch off the fretboard. And they just tore up my little adolescent fingers, until they were like nearly bloody and blistered. I didn't like that at all, and I didn't like practicing. And, they had a guy giving me lessons for a little bit. But I was just, I don't know, it hurt. So I put it aside to do other, fun stuff with my friends, such as, playing touch football, whatever was going on there in this stage of my career. But then my parents came back from a trip they took to Spain, and they brought with them a nylon string guitar and gave that to me to work out on, and that was a joy to play. That was just utterly so easy on the fingers. So then I started to make some progress,
It doesn't chew up the fingers so much with a nylon
No,
guitar.
no. Yeah, and also the tone is great. It's like I recommend for beginners nylon string guitar as like your introductory, model of a guitar. But at this stage, everybody and their brother and sister can play the guitar. When I was doing it, it was getting popular, but not nearly as ubiquitous.
What kind of music were you listening to back then when you got that guitar?
Okay. Oh yeah, there was there was a song that was kind of a hit on this radio station in Syracuse called "Dance with the Guitar Man," and the artist was Dwayne Eddy, who had a twangy sound. He was Mr. Twang, kind of a sort of rockabilly, but he did instrumentals like Peter Gunn. And I had that album, Dance with the Guitar Man, and I was like, that's what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be a guitar man, you know. That's, I don't know. I remember it, there was singing on it. It was a song that was written by, I think, Nancy Sinatra's partner, Lee Hazelwood, who wrote a lot of her hits. He was sort of a producer writer.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, that was, you know, once the British invasion got going, this is where my focus gravitated to. I mean, everybody woke up when the Beatles arrived in '64, I think it was, on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Yeah.
And lucky for me, I was already playing. But, the Beatles were fine, but it was the Stones that really did it for me. I mean, especially, Keith Richards, Brian Jones. They were sort of like early guitar gods. Hey, nothing wrong with George. George is a fantastic guitarist, George Harrison. I'm not trying to make an invidious comparison here because they were all great.
Mm-hmm.
But the Stones, their sort of bluesier approach, and I don't know, it really captivated me, and still they're like one of my favorite groups. I find that their music has held up over the years.
How old would you have been when the British invasion happened?
So if this is '64 was then the ripe old age of 12, I'm already like, getting along in years. But I've been playing for several years already.
Oh, so you were at the right place at the right time with a...
Yeah, I guess, and I even before the British invasion, I had in those days, the word rock band or band, that wasn't used a lot. I didn't hear it. Combo. That's what I heard. The combo. I had a combo. I mean, this is now an archaic term out of, just the historical memory, but, and we were doing, let's see, sort of like traditional instrumental pop hits. And these songs probably don't mean anything to you, and maybe there's a couple of oldsters out there, they might ring a bell. Java by Al Hertz, the trumpet player. That was a big hit back in the day. Uh-huh. We did a version of that. We did the theme from Peter Gunn.
Yep.
We got fake books. Does that ring a bell?
What a fake, of course.
Yeah, okay.
I know what a fake book is. Yeah.
Sure, you do. But most people don't, if they're not involved in music at any way, sort of like trying to play it or anything, they would know.
For those that are listening, a fake book would just be a book with chord changes,
chord
right?
changes and sometimes with the lyrics. Anyway, we got, some fake books that had a repertoire, although there were misprints that said, okay, for instruments in F or instruments in C, or whatever the tonal key was of the instrument. But it was all the same music in each book. So it was like, what good are these, man? But anyway, so I had this combo. We did the school assembly, I think when I was in the 6th grade. And I borrowed, maybe my guitar teacher, somebody lent me an electric guitar, which I'd never, ever played before. I couldn't tell you what model it was or anything, but this is really foggy. And in those days, you could, if you had a big FM radio, which was all the rage, there was a way to jack into the radio speaker, and the thing functioned as a guitar amplifier. Yeah,
that's amazing.
With a lot of static and noise, but that's what I used to amplify myself at this school.
Would you hear the radio station as well at the same time?
No,
or it would cut it out?
Well, that would be, yeah. We cut it out, or it just automatically cut out. But I borrowed my parents' FM. I don't know, what I was thinking.
You had to do what you had to do back then, right? I remember when I first got started with recording, I found 2 cassette players, and I was able to put them together and find a way to put my keyboard into one cassette. And that was my initial recording device, just whatever I could get my hands on to make it work. And I love that you were playing out of a radio for this school assembly. It's great.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, and, we did okay, I think. And then, in subsequent years, I did finally, for my bar mitzvah when I turned 13, right? This is a ceremony in the Jewish tradition
Yeah.
where supposedly you've reached manhood. So you have a big party and or the religious ceremony, and then people traditionally would give you gifts. So my father gave me a Fender Stratocaster.
Wow.
But I could kick myself because I could not, a Fender Strat and a Gibson Starfire amp that was set up in the basement. I just couldn't get the tone that I wanted to hear out of this setup. I got frustrated, and I just didn't feel like playing it. What an idiot I was. I mean, if I had this guitar today, it would be worth something, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So it was a 65, right? So anyway, they replaced it. They sold it to one of my father's friends for his son. And I got a 12-string Clyra. That's a Swedish manufacturer of guitars. I don't know if they're still in business. And so for a season or two, a couple of years, I was like an acoustic guitarist specializing. So I loved the sound of like the psychedelic music that had really started up with groups like the Yardbirds and, with open tunings. This became very influential on my playing. Anyway, the strings would break on the 12 string and I didn't replace them, and it got easier and easier to bend the strings. So I could play kind of raga improvs on it.
Did your 12 string eventually become a 6 string then?
Well, maybe. I don't, you know what? It's a lot of this is lost to the mists of time because I used to have great clarity about all of these things. And at this stage of the game, it's sort of like, yeah, I guess probably. But I couldn't tell you for sure, but I do know that I decided to go back and try my hand at electric guitar. And so the next thing that I acquired very cheaply was an Epiphone. I think it was, what the heck is that model? A Coronado? I think the Epiphone Coronado. It's sort of their version of a Stratocaster with one pickup on it, but a double cutaway.
Mm-hmm.
And this thing, given the right amplifier, especially a really cheap, little amplifier that you could turn up and crank to 11, you could get a good squawky sustain on the thing. So I started to really play that a lot. And yeah.
This is around the age of 14, 15 or so?
Yeah, I think it was, around that.
Okay. Still playing in bands, still
Oh,
gigging?
yeah. But then I went off to college, and became very involved, like in the radio station, and also the Yale marching band. I'm sorry, it was Yale University, folks. Don't hate me. I'm not an elitist, but that's where I don't know. That's where my parents wanted me to go, and I was a bright young thing in those days.
What were you studying at Yale?
English literature,
Okay.
Shakespeare and stuff. I took one music theory course for 1 hour only. And I said, I have no keyboard facility, and you really need to be able to play a bit. And it's too theoretical for me. So I've done mainly everything I've done by ear. I was blessed with a good ear.
Good.
And I think, if I'd had more overview of like what's necessary, I would have become more adept at things like sight reading. I mean, I can read music. I should mention I started the guitar, the lessons back when I was 9. At the same point, I was 9 years old, so that's 61. At the same time, I was given the French horn to pursue by the leader of the band. This is the, you know, there's the proper application of the word band. In my elementary school and junior high and high school, which were all public schools, we had a very good instructor, one guy, John Iannata. I have to really give him credit because he was he was sort of like a Leonard Bernstein to us, and he instilled a love of music in people who went out for the band. And because I tested well on a music aptitude test to measure pitch, your sense of rhythm, tonality, he assigned me the French horn, which is ridiculous because I barely have an upper lip to be able to get a good embouchure to produce a mellow tone, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, before the French horn, it was, speaking of which, it was a mellophone, which is like the junior brother of the French horn.
Okay.
But I persevered, I don't know, and I was wearing braces at the time, so it was cutting up my lips. But they made little wax impressions that could go over the braces.
Gary, you're bringing me back because I played tuba in
Really?
the
Okay,
seventh and eighth grade with braces, and
right.
I remember just the feeling after an hour of playing that big mouthpiece and
Oh,
just
God.
the braces just digging into the lips and everything.
Yeah,
on one
no,
side.
it's just, you know, it's a strenuous activity,
Yes.
making music. You know, I don't know. Yeah. So, you know, I liked, I mean, I was thrown out of the band eventually after about 6, 7 years because I became a hippie, and the guy, Mr. I, we call him, was not into the flower power movement that was sweeping across America. He was a neoconservative guy.
Okay.
And one day I wore sandals to the band practice, so that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Oh no, the sandals.
Yeah, it was that, and also he caught me improvising once on a march. Like I thought I was jazzing it up, you know, I was like adding little fills and everything as best I could. More like a Dixieland approach. Well, no, he was, you know, I mean, I think it showed I was adventurous and that I had a penchant.
That's the great thing about being able to play by ear is that you have the ability to go off and play whatever's in your head.
Yeah.
And clearly that's where you went. You had that ability, and that's what you love to do. You love to sit down with an instrument and noodle and figure
Yeah.
things out and
Uh,
see where it goes.
so that's also, you know, my composition method. It's like I know often, I mean, Grace was definitely, and Mojo Pin derived from just basically turning off my conscious mind, holding the guitar, and just playing whatever came into my head, just passing my fingers randomly on some strings until I hit what I thought were magic notes there, magic motifs. In both cases, I think pretty strong riffs. You know, that my songs are kind of riff-oriented, guitar riffs. And I've written what I think are some very original ones, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Those are not even that easy for guitarists to play. Like even, I know Jeff had his own way of doing it once we split. And I think it was more like out of a technical need on his part. But anyway.
Speaking of writing, and when did the writing bug start with you? Would that have been in your
Kind of
teenage
late.
years?
No, you know, well, yeah, I mean, I think I wrote one piece or something, you know. But I was always like of the opinion that it wasn't, you know, it was more playing, and I loved arranging on guitar covers, doing a lot of soundtracks and other people's music. But as far as original music, it only became important when I went and put the first Gods and Monsters together, I'd say. Because there I had to do it. I didn't want to just do kind of I mean, it started as a jazz rock ensemble with two bassists, and I got bored with that. And we were doing just jam tunes, basically, you know, like Miles Davis, Jack Johnson, great, you know, um, album and those themes. And I said, no, I want to start writing original songs. Well, anybody can write a song better than I can. I don't know. I had very negative feelings about it. I didn't even want to try. And then finally I said, the hell with it. I'm going to try. And I had this like progression. I had the guitar tuned to open E minor. Like I mentioned, I was into tunings, and that's a good one. I mean, you could tune the guitar any which way if you want, and Joni Mitchell has proven it. Like she has hundreds, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And but I have, my fallbacks. To me, open E minor. I've written a lot of music that was derived in that tuning, and
Is there anybody that showed you these things along the way? That was there?
no,
Do you have a mentor
not
or somebody that?
really.
No.
Well, not really. I mean, the one thing that was shown me was when I got to college. There were a couple of kids there who played acoustically, and they were using finger picks on the right hand. I mean, metal picks to go over all the fingers and a thumb pick. And they were very adept at this kind of Americana, John Fahey-esque style of picking. And they knew his repertoire really well. And I had been trying to achieve the sound of finger picking up to that point with rapid, like, strokes with a flat pick with my right hand, just dancing from string to string. But it wasn't the same, because if you really get into finger picking, you can do contrapuntal things on the guitar with a walking bass line and, can be very, very symphonic sounding.
Mm-hmm.
So they showed me the rudiments of finger picking, but I quickly realized I couldn't function with the finger picks. They just felt cumbersome on my hands. So I said, all right, well, I'm going to figure out a way of doing it, just using the pads of my fingertips, but toughening them up by playing, but not too much so I don't break blood blisters, but you have to do a certain level of this kind of cauterizing the fingertips by playing on the strings, and you have to keep it up, because if I slack off, I'm playing even a little bit, the calluses on both fingers start to dissolve, and you don't want that,
Mm-hmm.
no, especially in the winter. I mean, I don't know what you guys do up there, but I used to have terrible problems whenever it get really cold in New York. Somehow the blisters would dissolve and break and crack, and I got liquid skin to paint. I don't know. I had gigs coming up with band-aids or anything.
Mm.
It's a. So anyway, that's the one thing that was shown me. But the actual tunings, I just heard them. I could listen to some of the records where they were getting these John Fahey records. He was a big influence. Bert Jansch, all the British folk guitarists and people, in the blues idiom who would use open tunings, open A, open G. There's a C modal tuning that I got very interested in. And once I sort of got into the idea of finding shapes that had open strings in them where you weren't clamping down every string to make the chord, there was a whole new harmonic universe there of beauty with drones going on with these open strings. And,
Mm-hmm.
So just in working a lot and putting in the time, songs emerged. So the first song I wrote was a song called Poison Tree, which is on my album Gods and Monsters, as sung by the great Canadian artist, Mary Margaret O'Hara.
Cool.
Yeah, who you may know, actually,
Yep.
who lives in Toronto, and She's Catherine O'Hara's sister, and
Mhm.
she was great. She sang it for me. She was in New York, and it's really, I'm very proud of that.
And that was the very first song that you wrote.
Yeah, yeah, that I can recall, words and music. Very first. So that was already, what year were you talking about here? Has to be about 88 or 89, I think. Or maybe a few years before that. But this is when I was trying to put the band together in a new format with songs, right? Now I got to write a song. That was the first one that emerged. And it's got a very weird tonality to it with the chords and the open tunings. And I'm still playing it. If I was going to do a concert for you, either solo or with a band, that would be in there. It was still, I don't know. The first thought, best thought, Allen Ginsberg used to say. So
Yeah. I feel like we're flying through the years. Like I'm sort of getting like little bits of each section of your life. But how did you go from Yale to all of a sudden you're in a band
oh
and
God, all right.
you're
Yeah.
writing songs for
Okay. Yeah, I
artists?
know. I've skipped a lot. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. It's all
The
good.
through line is like, okay, I I got through Yale. I played in the marching band with an electric with that Epiphone Cornata set up on the sidelines. Of course, I couldn't march with it. They didn't have wireless guitars in those days. But I had my friend lent me a 200-watt Marshall stack, I think it was. We do things like the theme from Shaft, and the band would be out there doing hijinks. So I was in the radio station too. I was a DJ. I had a show that ran over the years. And one whole summer or two, I stayed up there to broadcast every day. It was called The Sounds from England. I was an Anglophile, and Other Delicacies. And I played pretty much I ruined my record collection. I have all these singles. Well, the tone arms were they had pennies scotch taped to them to hold them down, and the turntables. It wasn't like everything was on carts,
Yeah.
or pre-recorded. In those days, you actually, if you wanted to play something that was unusual, you had to bring in your own record collection, but you took the risk. But
Yeah.
anyway. Look, I got a whole wall of like albums up there, but I never take them down. It's just decorative at this point.
Yes.
I'm happy to have books too, but I've sort of stopped consuming cultural artifacts other than some literary journals here and there to find out if there are books out there coming out I'm interested in. But anyway, so I got through Yale. Then let's see, I had a sort of a lost year, and I was living with this older woman on the Upper West Side, and I had a mandolin back then. She was very argumentative. I remember she smashed it into a million pieces once
Oh no.
in a chair. Yeah, yeah. Oh well. Uh, and eventually, my father and mom intervened because they were scandalized by this relation. Because I was like 22 and she was 56, if you can believe it. She
Wow.
looked a lot younger, but I think the idea of having an older lover was appealing to me at that point. But they sent me to work for my dad to get me away from her, and I went to the Far East to Taipei, Taiwan, where he had some import-export biz trying to do going on. And there I put a band together, too, in my spare time with a Chinese rhythm section. I have an album out of Chinese music from the day of the 40s in Shanghai. It was very amazing time. It was a cosmopolitan city. There was a lot of cross-fertilization of genres, a big European jazz community of refugees from, the Nazis and fascists, and they wound up in Shanghai, which was a free port. And I had a Chinese girlfriend who I later married. It was a lot of stuff was happening at once. But this band in Taiwan was really something. But again, we weren't doing originals. We were doing stuff like Velvet Underground, Sweet Jane, Diana Ross, Love Hangover. I had a disco version of that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I'm still in touch with a couple of those guys. I had a Swedish rhythm guitarist who was great, and a Jewish kid from Shaker Heights on blues harp. And somehow, we made it work. If you go to my SoundCloud page, you can hear examples of some of these different projects from cassettes that were about to get thrown out. And anyway, I was over there nearly a year and a half. And then when I came back, um, I was like just sort of not sure what I was going to do. And I went down to New York and walked in to see a friend of mine. I walked in and, to CBS Records to visit my friend who was in Epic Records publicity at that point. And she called a guy and said, "Oh, we've got this really talented young man in here I've known, and I'm sure, he's a great writer." Because I was an English major, And they hired me, to write ads. So I held this job for 13 years as a copywriter for all of the product that was coming out on CBS, Epic and Columbia Records and some of the classical labels. It was child's play, to tell you the truth, but I was very good at it, and I could crank out lines, copy about this and that, everything. The Jacksons before, Bruce Springsteen, The Clash. Whenever there was a punk thing, I was always,
Oh, cool.
big on working on that.
Yeah.
And in this period, too, is when I hooked up with Captain Beefheart. I don't think you mentioned. Oh, yeah, you did mention him in the introduction. Now, Beefheart was someone I'd met up at Yale when he came up there to play a concert. I was like the only person who really was an enormous fan, thanks to, I think the introduction was through Frank Zappa, who I loved as a boy. And I hung out with him, and I really bonded with him and his wife. And I didn't tell him that I played the guitar, though. I said nothing about that because I was shy. Essentially, I am a very shy person, believe it or not. And I didn't think I was good enough, but secretly I was sort of studying his music, which is very, very complicated, based on blues forms, but with a lot of free jazz involved in it, and Ornette Coleman influences, and very visionary, quite the genius, a great lyricist as well, in a kind of beatnik poetry way. It's hard to describe, but he's been very influential, yet, they'll probably never let him in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, And
Unbelievable.
I know. I reached out to him. Oh, he came up, I tell you what, before I moved to New York. God, see, it's like hard. The chronology is all scrambled up at this point. I can't really do a sequential.
You're saying that Frank Zappa introduced you to Captain Beefheart?
Well, I knew of his work because Frank talked him up a lot, but he was making his own records.
How did you meet Frank Zappa? That's a whole other story that
Well,
I'd love to hear.
I was a fan, of course, of the Mothers. I thought they were fantastic. I didn't really know Beefheart stuff until I saw an album appear in '69. Yeah, called Trout Mask Replica, which is many consider his masterpiece. It's a double album. And on the back it said produced by Frank Zappa, so I gotta get this. And it didn't really make sense at first until it did. And a couple of listens convinced me it's not just random noise. It's like sculpted music. It's like they're playing parts. It's almost like modern classical music, but very, very the energy of rock and jazz. And anyway, I became fanatic about him. And then he came up to Yale and I met him. And again, I didn't, tell him I played guitar, but I had ambitions Now, Ry Cooder, who everybody knows, was in Beefheart's first band when he was about 16 or 17. And so to play in his band, you had to be a really good musician, and he was big on featuring guitarists. And so my next encounter was when I was home before I went to the Far East to work for my dad, in that kind of the end of that lost year with a 56-year-old woman. I was in Syracuse studying Mandarin Chinese a little bit to get, which I was not very good at, to get ready for that trip. And then I saw in the paper, Frank Zappa was special guest Captain Beefheart. And I was like, how can that be? That's, I thought they were enemies. I mean, it's a lot of gossip here. I don't want to go into it, but they had a tempestuous relationship, I think more on Beefheart's part. He was very, very mercurial person. Genius, certifiable, and certified insane too at the same time. I mean, some people think that you need a touch, if not a whole lot of madness to be a good artist. I don't really believe there's any prerequisites, but be that it as it, may, many creative artists have a sort of schizophrenic personality at the least,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, this is where I made my move. Like they brought, Frank Zappa brought Beefheart, whose real name is Don Van Vliet, out from the Wings to do 2 or 3 songs in the set around the time they had an album together called Bongo Fury. And he was great. So when they were packing up to go, I went down to the stage, and I was just sort of like standing there looking helpless or lonely and I don't know, out of it. And I called his name and he went, Gary. And he came over and he hugged me. And so he wanted to get something to eat. I took him to this place that served barbecue spare ribs at midnight in the ghetto of Syracuse, New York. There was a guy who operated this thing after hours. And that's in the middle of a rib or something. I said, Don, if you ever put your band back together, I'd love an opportunity to play in it. And he said, you play guitar, man? Why didn't you tell me? And I said, well, I didn't think I was good enough, but I think I can do it. I'd like a shot. And he said, okay, bring your guitar. I'm playing in Boston with Frank on Friday. So this was like Sunday night or Monday. I don't know what they did, if they had any gigs that week, but I took the Greyhound bus to Boston and stayed with a friend of mine. That's what you got to do if you want to really, be a musician. You got to really apply yourself, hustle. So, and then I met him. I went back to his hotel when their show was over. I played, and he was like, "Yeah, we're gonna do something." But I was, gee, I'm going to Taiwan next week. Anyway, but I made the connection. So eventually, once coming back from the Far East with my ex-wife, this Chinese woman, Ling, setting up in San Francisco, I went to see him again. When he was playing, he'd put a band together in the meantime again. But we stayed in touch. And then I pursued it. I got the job at CBS. I called him on that. They had like free telephone service all over the world if you were bold enough to, to want to do it, which I did. So I talked to him a lot. And then in 1980, he asked me if I'd play a piece on a record he was going to make, and that's how I got in there. He sent me a piece on piano. Actually, it was written on piano. The piece was played on guitar by another guy, but it had never come out. I learned that. I really sweated to play. And I should mention I acquired an old Strat my senior year at Yale, a 64. And it didn't look like much. It was all beat up, but it had a great tone, which that's a sad story. It was lost on a train.
No.
But I had insurance on it. If you're listening and you're a musician, get musical instrument insurance, very important. So I got like 10 grand, to replace it, and I got the Stratocaster that I've used ever since. And but anyway,
I wonder where that guitar is now. The one that was
yeah,
lost on the
in
train.
somebody's house. Look, I went to the police. I went to the train station. I put a note in a music magazine. Was looking for it anyway. But
It's meant to be.
yeah. So, but it's too bad because like I had done Grace and another Jeff Buckley song on that guitar and the Beefheart stuff. But fuck it. I mean, they're just planks of wood.
Yeah.
When you get right down to it. So.
I just said goodbye to my mother's piano that I learned how to play
Oh
on.
wow.
And when the movers came, just half an hour before they came, I sat down with it and I played some of the beginning songs that I ever learned how to play on there.
Right.
And I had to just remind myself, it is just wood. It is just something that somebody put together.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's the memories, I think, are
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're playing it. You're playing with Beefheart.
Yeah, I
You're in
played.
the
I
band
did
now.
2 records with him. I toured in Europe with him and a few dates in the U.S., but kind of as an auxiliary guest. Then when we got to do the second, came out and did some solo pieces. You'll see him on YouTube. The one that put me on the map was called Flavor Bud Living, which got amazing reviews and all of it. Rolling Stone, a musician magazine, and kind of spotlit me as a guitarist of note. And then on the last Beefheart album, Ice Cream for Crow on Virgin, I had a showpiece called Evening Bell, which was even more complex and meanders all over the place and keys and, I don't know.
And
And that,
these are compositions that you were coming up with,
no,
or this
that
was
he
Don?
wrote. This was all, he would write them on piano.
Yeah.
Meaning he composed them. He could noodle around. He couldn't repeat it. He was he was a primitive. He could get great effects going and tape himself and then hand you this tape like a snapshot and say, learn this. And it'd be like mistakes and all, but he'd say there are no mistakes. So that's why they have this quirky, frantic quality. It's also his breathing and his phrasing.
Mm-hmm.
You had to try and imitate it perfectly. It's like once someone compared it to taking a deck of cards, throwing it in the air, taking a Polaroid of all of them falling, and then saying, paint that. Or like learn that. Yeah.
So interesting.
But he was, it really, I've never met anyone who composed like that. And he also took found sounds out of nature. He had an old Volvo and the windshield wipers were like, yeah, yeah, yeah. That became like a song, the intro for a song called Bat Chain Puller, the sound of his windshield wipers. But you wouldn't know it listening to it, but that's where it was derived from. Yeah, I could write a book about that guy.
I love that. That reminds me of the Bee Gees doing one of their songs from the disco era, and they were driving in to the studio every morning on the bridge, and the sound of the wheels on the bridge ended up being the rhythm that's at the beginning of one of their songs.
I'm sure it's like something, inherent in many compositions, but, people don't talk about it. Like sometimes they're inspiration so much. But
That's right. That's right.
yeah.
So, okay, you're in Captain Beefheart. How does it get to working
Me,
with
so,
multiple
oh,
artists and you
right. Well,
becoming
okay, I was in there. I put in about 4 or 5 years. Only like a couple of them were spent making the records and playing the music and touring. And the rest, I'm his manager, which was a thankless task. And I was just holding his hand a lot, like on the phone, and having long philosophical conversations. And then eventually, trying to think, I went out to see him and it was very awkward and he was, very irascible and had his famous temper. And I caught a lot of like flack for nothing, in my view, for just trying to be there to help him. And I just said, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. So I wrote a letter and said, I'm very proud of the work we did, but I can't do this anymore. And never he didn't make another record after that. I helped get him set up as a painter, as a fine artist, by making introductions to some famous painters in New York. And
Mm-hmm.
his work is in many galleries, and I'm proud of that. But, you know, I got involved for the music and not to just do that.
Mm-hmm.
So then I was like, now I want to, I should do my own music. Why rely on these other people? And that is what motivated me. That, and I think a girl I was like kind of like sweet on dared me to do a show. I went down to the old knitting factory. It was on Mulberry Street in Houston. I met the owner, Michael Dorff, who was a nice guy, and he was like, Beefheart's guitarist, we'll give you a show here. At that point, the knitting factory was like the epicenter of cool downtown music. It's been known to be referred to, what does that mean? Anything slightly on the avant-garde tip. They were doing world music and jazz and experimental music there, all sorts of things. And I went and put a set together, expecting the worst. My name was left out of the ad in the Village Voice that week.
Oh,
I'm like,
no.
oh man, this is going to be a disaster, man. I get to the club to set up. There's a line around the block. And I put a few posters. They weren't even real posters, like flyers about. And I was like, oh my God. And then I went out and I played in a trance and I got an ovation. Then they handed me $600, I think, off the door. And I felt like, oh my God, I should have been doing this. What? I'm an idiot. I just proved I can move a whole crowd solo. I got to really hit this harder.
Amazing.
And that was a turning point that night. It was like in June of 1988. So I'm then already 36, just about to turn 36. A lot of people said, you're too old, you can't do it. And I said, I'm going to kick the door down. I was like pretty determined.
Yeah.
And that's when I then the next year I put a band together, I put a film score together to accompany a German silent film. Started to, make attempts to write and just kept going. Now I feel like I've said everything I'm going to say. I got nothing left. I feel like, I put so much music out. 50 albums, is a lot. And I'm proud of them.
From 1988 until
Till the present day, I think, until last year.
50 albums.
I
Man.
know. It's like I just cranked them. They weren't just cranked out, obviously, but I was like, got to do this, got to do this. Sometimes 2 or 3 would come out in a year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just to keep being prolific and try to keep my name out there in the world. It was sort of like what I felt I had to do in lieu of having a major label to promote the stuff. I had to be my own, promo guy, publicist, everything.
And along the way, people would hear these records and
Yeah,
you'd have
and would
artists.
like him. And then, Jeff Buckley, when I met him, and that was because there was a tribute a couple years after I left CBS as a copywriter. And after I started playing out in this knitting factory scene, there was a tribute to his father. And Jeff, Tim's son, Jeff, contacted them, said, I want to play. Now, he might have said, and I want to work with Gary Lucas because, the guy who put us together nominally, Hal Wilner, who was my friend, who was a great producer, more on the multi-artist album. He was like a pioneer of getting artists to, many artists to do a tribute to so-and-so. Done a few. He called me up one day and said, I'd like you to be at this tribute to Tim Buckley. And I was a big Tim Buckley fan from high school. Don't know if you know Tim's music, but he was awesome. Some people who know the two of them prefer Tim's music. I think they're equally great. They're different, but there's influence there on Jeff, vocally and otherwise. So I went down there not knowing what. He said, I think you'd be good working with this Jeff Buckley. I said, I don't know who that is. He goes, well, that's Tim's son. We didn't know he existed either, but he's contacted us and he wants to be in this tribute to his dad. So I went down there with, at that point, I was signed to Columbia Records with a version of Gods and Monsters that had a female lead singer, but it wasn't going well. We weren't really getting along. And I was thinking, I really wish I had a male vocalist. And when we finished our little run through the day before, 2 days before the actual gig, I'm packing up my gear, and this kid walked up to me, and I knew this is Jeff Buckley, I'm sure, because he looked just like the spitting image of his dad. And he was overwhelmingly friendly to me. And I said, come on over tomorrow. Let's work on your father's song that they'd assigned us. And he came over the next day, and we just got right down to playing over in the corner over here behind me, still in the same apartment. And I heard him, I handed him a mic, and I heard his voice. I was like, oh my God. Like, Jeff, you are a star. He was shy. He was like, really? Yeah. I think he knew how good he was, but at that point, he was like very, you know, very sweet and vulnerable uh, appearing, and but in any case, the wheel started to turn in my head. I said, let's go have lunch. And over lunch, I said, man, I'd love to do a project with you. I've got this album deal with Columbia, and I think I'm going to try and see if I can get you on there as a guest. And so he loved that idea. And then we came back, we jammed out a song. We decided the first thing that came up as a topic of conversation was, who are your favorite artists? So he said, The Doors, The Smiths, and Led Zeppelin. And I said, hey, I love them, man. Me too. And they all had a strong lead singer and a guitar hero in the format. So I thought, this is what we should do. And anyway, so we did the show, and everyone noticed Jeff. He made the biggest impression on everybody, and everybody was, buzzing. Then he went back to LA. And then I went off to tour in Europe. I was doing a lot of like solo gigs, and my deal got shaky. The guy who signed us left the company to go to another big corporation company. And the new guy was like insecure about it. And eventually they just kicked it to the curb without a note after being under contract for a couple of years. And I said, I gotta keep going. I got Jeff waiting in the wings. So I rang him, I told him what happened. He said, I'll be your singer. So with that energy, I woke up refreshed. I started passing my fingers over the guitar. And the motifs that became Grace and Mojo Pin, which are the first two songs on the Grace album, emerged. And I'm working on them over a couple of days. I had two instrumentals. I put on a cassette, mailed it to Jeff, snail mail. That's all you could do. There were no MP3s. And he said, they're beautiful. I'm gonna be in New York. And let's work on them when I get there. I said, great.
You came up with the ideas for both of those songs on the same day.
Yeah. Well, one of them, I think Mojo Pin, I had a section, Grace, I had a section of it that was a new piece I was composing going back a couple of months before I met Jeff. So that was referred to, but essentially, yes. Yeah, essentially, yes. And they're both in drop D tuning for all of the guitar freaks out there, where the low E string is tuned down to D. They have a certain tonal beauty about them. I love this tuning. And Jeff came a month or so later on a very hot and muggy night, came over, said, start playing, and he had lyrics written, and he started to sing Grace, what became Grace. my title was Rise Up to Be, and I was trying to encourage him, rise up to be and join my band. Uh, and it's just kind of great. And then the only thing he changed was he said, repeat this section. I feel I got more lyrics I want to put in there. So he extended one thing in a verse, but it was there. And same with the other one. And I got excited. I said, let's demo these up. So I knew a place where we could do this. A few days later, we went in there. I invited the last couple of guys who were in Gods and Monsters at that point to be the rhythm section. We worked on trying to get passable band tracks, very little overdubs. You know, you can hear them. One is on a greatest hits album of mine called The Essential Gary Lucas, let's say. You know, Grace is probably the closest thing I've had to a hit. That and a Joan Osborne song I wrote with some other people called Spiderweb.
That's a great song too.
Yeah. You know, but again, based around my mind, these like open tuning and riffs that just occurred to me. And Jeff came down after, like, we had 1 hour to go, and he sang his ass off. And I'm sitting in the dark in the booth with this engineer, and I'm going, oh my God, listen to this. I had no idea. I mean, I was just trying to get my parts played accurately. I trusted him, like I try to do with collaborators. I let them do what the best they can do, because if the more attention I put on it, I think the worse the result if I like direct them too much. Other than on Mojo Pin, I said to Jeff with his vocals, more Robert Plant in one section, because he was going for this sort of vibe. And then when I walked out of there, like, I have the atomic bomb on a DAT in my pocket. It was like that. I was given the final mixes on DAT. And yeah, so.
What happened then? You handed these songs in to who?
Well, I gave them to my lawyer, who was a friend, and he played them for a few people. And we got a nibble at a BMG affiliated label. And they put up enough money to bring Jeff to write with me. And early in, what year are we talking about here? Was it 2009? Well, in any case, he came early in the next year. And we met every day over here. And we wrote a whole album together. I think this is 92. Going into 93, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. And then they insisted on a public showcase. And then Jeff had a problem with the players who were on the demos and insisted I replace them. And I just, acceded to every demand because I didn't want the thing to fall apart. But I saw, the whole dynamic of the relationship had changed. And we did this public showcase on Friday the 13th. Oh, this is 92. Yeah, 1992. Friday the 13th. And, yeah, it was like, 32 years ago? Something like that, I think. But, the next day, I was listening to the playback of the board tape of us live, and I was really excited. So was my wife. Boy, he sang his ass off. The song sounds great. Even if this label doesn't want to go through with a deal, because all we had was a development deal. We'll get another deal. So Jeff called and quit right after these celebrations. And yeah, it's like painful to recount, but anyway, I kept going. He really wanted to be solo all along. And obviously I was kind of in denial. But, I just keep on keeping on. And he got a big deal with Columbia Records. but I had already been on Columbia Records, at least signed, and then dropped unceremoniously with my female singer. So look, yeah, it's like I wrote a book about this, about everything kind of, or a lot of things that happened in the relationship in that year. It's called Touched by Grace, my time with Jeff Buckley. And I just, I'm in awe of like the work that we did. I wish it could have sustained itself, beyond, but he did afford, me the honor of getting the first two songs on that record, Grace and Mojo Pin. I mean, the record opens with Mojo Pin, which is my guitar and this drone.
Is that the original guitar recorded from the demo, or did you go in and replay for?
No, he invited me up to Bearsville studio to work on this, which was great, I mean, so we had a reconciliation. He called me up after not hearing from him for a year. I could have hung up the phone, but I was like not going to do that, because I was somewhat angry about the way it ended so abruptly. But, you know, he said, Gary, I really would love to have you play on this record. I got this deal with Columbia. And I was like, great, sure. Okay. So uh, they came out beautifully. I think Andy Wallace did a great job as the producer, and the band that he'd put together was excellent. And to have a really, you know, they're very, they're very vivid. And, Jeff is so talented that his performance is iconic. I mean, I've done many tributes over the years to Jeff, playing those songs with a variety of singers. And, it's difficult because the vocals are so definitive that a lot of times I think it's hard for a singer to try and even rise to that level of intensity, but beautiful. I mean, I'd say really the two greatest moments in my career would be those two songs. Just the rush of recording them, and I just had a feeling they were going to be, classics, and the fact that they're, considered among the greatest, at least Gray's among the greatest songs of all time, is really an honor for me. I'm just, was overwhelmingly sad at the death of Jeff because, I loved him and I never really got the chance to spend time with him after this blow up. Although we did, work in the studio together and, I talked to him a few times, but, and also from a selfish standpoint, because I was like, think of all the great songs we still could have done.
Yeah.
There was no limit to what I think we could have accomplished, but he accomplished plenty, just as Jeff Buckley without me. And so I'm not trying to diminish that in any way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just, really grateful that I had an opportunity to work for him and work with him, and it was very much a joint effort. I don't think either of us could have come up with anything as good as what the songs were on our own.
You needed each other.
Yeah, we needed each other. I mean, and then he was tragically, gone at quite an early age in his career, and they hadn't really even kicked in a big way. So it's only like over the years that the whole thing has grown now to like a mythic status. But he was something else. Wow. And when you consider him and all the great artists I worked with, Beefheart, two incredible singers, and he loved Beefheart. I think he might have chose to work with me when he saw the list of artists because he knew my work with Beefheart. But I never asked him about that, but that's for sure. And then on and on, Chris Cornell, this guy, that guy. I've had a wonderful, succession of great artists.
I was going to ask you, what is your world become when you get something like Grace? Like all of a sudden you must have everybody wanting a piece of Gary Lucas. And
Yeah, and I mean, for a while, I guess, but the fact is, unless you read the fine print on those records and you're a big fan, like I'm credited obviously in the co-write and co-publishing in the small print as a songwriter, and also he gave me a special thanks for magical guitarness. So there's a lot of people who know that work, and a lot of fans. Like today, I was just walking the dog, and some British people from Manchester, like, started talking to me out in front of the White Horse, which is where exactly I proposed. Jeff and I worked together on stuff. After our very first play together, I took him there for a hamburger. The White Horse Tavern, that's my local. So right in front of it was three kids from Manchester. And I don't know, I was like, I'm really sorry about what just happened in Manchester with uh, this horrible murder of Jewish people a couple of days ago. And so they were like, yeah, that's awful. And what are you doing here? So the topic came up about just what I was doing, and I said, I'm a musician. I don't know if you know my work, but do you know Jeff Buckley? And they lit up and they said, oh, yeah. I said, well, I co-wrote Grace and Mojo Pin. And it was like they were giving me big honors. Like, wow, what's your name again? Wait a second, hold on. They couldn't believe it. But it's not like, I became a household name because of it either.
mm,
It's okay. Everything that's happened has been good, and I've no bitterness or complaints. And I just, I'm proud to have done it. I hope to just keep on keeping on and continue. Given the changes I've seen take place in the music biz, which, yeah, we could we could talk about or
that's
debate,
a
but
whole other episode.
it's a whole other episode. It's like even back then it was like what, you know, to get a handle on like what was going on, and now I don't know. I just continue to keep trying to work and be happy about what I'm doing. And
Gary, I've spent time with you in Ireland. We had a great week together mentoring a bunch of students, and I love your love of life and your love of music, and you always have a smile on your face. You're always like so pleasant to hang out with,
oh, you're
and
so nice, Rob. Well, I think I naturally have a kind of disposition to try and enjoy, you know, nice people like yourself, who are otherwise, in I mean, I have nothing but total respect for you and all the projects you've done.
oh, thank you.
But sometimes I'm a little shy and I'm like, I don't know, I'm like, are people going to know these songs? I wasn't sure, I know that the people who invited me there were big Jeff Buckley fans, but yeah, I mean, I think it's important to stay positive and to keep smiling. It's like a way of, life. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just so happy that your dad handed you a guitar all those years ago.
oh yeah, no, I know. I think he was actually proud of me. Once a few of these songs started to make some money. Other than that, it was like, my mom, when I told her I was going to leave to play with Beefheart, take a leave of absence from my day job as a copywriter, she said, the guitar, Murray, he's talking about the guitar again. There's a song for you right there.
Yes.
They thought I'd be a lawyer or a doctor or something, something respectable.
Yeah, I know. I know. It's hard when your parents want the absolute best for you, and sometimes music is not what they want you to be doing. But I love that your dad was such a supporter and giving you a guitar and really, coaching you on.
And he saw me play once down at the Battery here at the Bell Atlantic Jazz Festival, one of these things, playing solo, and I called him out I said, see that guy over there sitting there? I mean, that's my dad. Let's, depending on how you feel about my guitar playing, let's give him a big hand. Because he's the one who put me on the path. So,
Oh, that's incredible.
yeah, I was happy to give him props.
Gary, let me ask you this.
Sure.
I don't want to take up too much more of your
No, no,
time.
no, no. Go ahead.
Just if you have any advice for anybody who's thinking about picking up the guitar or chasing the world of music, or they have creativity in their bones or anything, just any sort of advice for their future.
I think, you got to really get into it for the right reasons. If you go into it thinking, I'm going to make a lot of money doing this, forget it. It'd be so much easier to go into tech or something, like that. If, on the other hand, you're driven because it just turns you on, the idea of like creating music and playing music, and you have a taste of it, I think don't let anybody discourage you, because everybody will discourage you. My parents tried to discourage me in a way, at certain point, because they just felt like, oh, he's going to be really vulnerable. My mom said to me once, how are you going to be able to, when you're 60, how are you going to be able to drag all that equipment overseas and back again? I have to do that. I have like some gigs coming up in France and then Holland in about 10 days. And yeah, I'm dreading the schlep out to but I'll do it. I don't know. You get porters or you try and get assistants to help you in these moments.
Yep.
But, you've got to have a certain maniacal drive to want to do it because it tickles you and it's fun. But I don't know, I would say it's just sort of, you'll know in your gut, in your bones that you were cut out for it, by just sort of sticking to it. There's no other route that I can see beyond sticking to your guns, I mean, that doesn't mean you can't stop or take breaks or like try and do something else. But if you really like, got it in your soul, it's going to have to come out one way or another. You should like nurture that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Gary, Lukas, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for taking time out
Oh,
of your
Rob,
busy schedule. And
I love that you could hear my rambling. Uh, wait a second. I'm, honored to be here and that you would invite me to be interviewed. That means a lot. And
it means a lot that you said yes. And
yeah,
I love you, brother. And
me
I
too.
wish you all the best. And I can't wait to hear what you're going to do next creatively. And I hope that someday I get to sit back and just hear you play for a few hours,
I
man.
would
That would be
love
such a
to.
treat.
I hope we can figure out a way to do that. I'd love to do that.
So cool. Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Gary.
Oh man, my honor,
And
my
safe
joy.
travels for your upcoming gigs,
Thank you.
and hope you get that porter service going on. So,
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
all right.
All right.
Thanks, brother.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon.
Talk soon.
Bye bye.
Bye.